The Adventures of Longery the Leprechaun. A short story written by Billy Walker. Presented by Story Stream Audio. Longery's Close Call. Longery, perched on the mossy edge of the old wishing well, swinging his legs and humming a tune only he could hear. The morning sun dappled through the leaves, painting gold coins of light on the forest floor. He was just about to launch into the second verse when a sharp voice cut through the air like a snapping twig. "Longery, what in the name of clover are you doing out in the open again?" Longery flinched, nearly tumbling into the well. He caught himself just in time and grinned sheepishly as his Uncle Datsun stomped into view. Datsun's beard was as wild as the brambles, and his boots squelched with every step, but his eyes, sharp and clear, missed nothing. "Uncle Datsun," Longery called, waving as if he'd just been discovered at a surprise party. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" Datsun folded his arms across his chest, the leather of his vest creaking. "Don't you lovely morning me, boy? How many times must I tell you? Never be seen by humans. Never. That's the first rule, second rule, and the third all wrapped up in a bow. You remember what happened to Cousin Finn?" Longery hopped down from the well, brushing imaginary dust from his emerald coat. "Cousin Finn got caught because he tried to juggle apples in the middle of the village market. I'm not juggling anything, just sitting." Datsun's voice softened a notch, but the warning in it was still clear. "It's not a game, Longery. The veil keeps us safe. If a human sees you, truly sees you, the magic weakens. The veil trembles, and if it falls, well, there's no hiding from their world then." Longery tried to look serious, but a mischievous smile tugged at his lips. "But what if I want to be famous? Maybe I'll start a leprechaun fan club. Humans love clubs, right? I could sign autographs, pose for paintings, maybe." Datsun's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly vanished into his hairline. "Famous? You want to end up in a museum, stuffed and labeled specimen? Mischievous leprechaun? Or worse, on one of their strange talk shows, answering questions about rainbows and pots of gold?" Longery giggled, unable to help himself. "Well, I do have excellent hair for television." Datsun's stern expression cracked, just a little, and a chuckle escaped him before he could stop it. "You're just like your mother, you know that? Always chasing trouble with a butterfly net." Longery's heart warmed at the mention of his mother, but he shrugged, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Trouble's more fun when you catch it, Uncle." Datsun crouched down so his face was level with Longery's. His voice dropped to a gentle rumble. "Promise me, lad. Promise you'll be careful. The world's bigger and stranger than you know. The veil is thin these days. Too thin. Magic's leaking out, and humans are noticing things they shouldn't." Longery looked into his uncle's eyes and, for a moment, the weight of the warning settled on his shoulders. He nodded solemnly. "I promise, Uncle Datsun. I'll be careful." Satisfied, Datsun straightened up, stretching his back with a groan. "Good. Now I've got to check the mushroom ring by the old oak. Last night's storm might have knocked it all sideways. Stay put, will you?" Longery saluted, his face the picture of innocence. "Aye, aye, Captain Datsun. I'll guard the well with my life." Datsun shook his head, muttering something about impossible nephews as he disappeared into the undergrowth, boots squelching and beard bobbing. The moment his uncle was out of sight, Longery's grin returned. Full force, he glanced around, making sure he was alone. Then he tiptoed to the edge of the clearing. The world beyond the veil called to him, full of secrets and stories just waiting to be discovered. He pressed a hand to the invisible barrier, feeling the tingle of magic against his skin. It was like touching a soap bubble, delicate, shimmering, and just a little bit dangerous. "Just a quick peek," he whispered to himself. "No harm in that." with a practiced flick of his wrist. Longery slipped through the veil, the magic parting around him like mist. The air on the other side was sharper, filled with the scent of wildflowers and distant wood smoke. He crouched low, scanning the meadow for any sign of humans. Nothing but a pair of rabbits, nibbling clover and gossiping quietly. Longery crept forward, heart pounding with excitement. Every step felt like an adventure. He imagined himself as a legendary explorer, mapping the unknown, discovering lost magic, and maybe, just maybe, making a little history of his own. Behind him, the veil shimmered, a silent reminder of the rules he'd just broken. But for now, Longery was free, and the world was wide open. He grinned, tucking a stray curl behind his ear. Famous, huh? Maybe just a little. And with that, Longery the Leprechaun set off into the sunlight, ready for whatever mischief the day may bring. Longery crouched low behind a row of garden gnomes, his heart thumping like a drum. The gnomes, with their chipped paint and crooked hats, stood frozen in mid-wink, as if they too were in on the secret. He squeezed himself between a gnome with a fishing rod and another holding a wheelbarrow, trying to blend in. If he kept very, very still, maybe he'd pass for just another ornament, albeit one with a bit more sparkle in his eyes. He peered around the fishing gnome's hat, surveying the edge of the human world. Beyond the neat picket fence, a garden bloomed with wild abandon. Daisies nodded in the breeze. Sunflowers craned their necks to catch every drop of sunlight. Just beyond the rose bushes, a girl with a messy ponytail and a purple backpack knelt in the grass, poking at something with a stick. Longery held his breath. Humans were curious creatures, always looking, always searching for things they weren't meant to find. Uncle Datson's warnings echoed in his mind. Never be seen by humans. Never. But the thrill of adventure was too much to resist. Besides, what were the odds she'd notice one extra gnome? The girl, Zoe, as he'd heard her mother call, suddenly looked up. Her eyes swept the garden, sharp and searching. Longery ducked lower, wishing he could shrink himself to the size of a pebble. Then, out of nowhere, a butterfly landed on his nose. He stifled a sneeze, but the fishing gnome wobbled dangerously. The girl's gaze snapped to the row of gnomes. Longery froze, his nose twitching. Zoe's eyes narrowed. She crept closer, her sneakers silent on the grass. "Weird," she murmured. "I don't remember that one." Longery's heart skipped a beat. He tried to look as gnome-like as possible, but his emerald coat and curly red hair were a dead giveaway. Zoe reached into her backpack and pulled out a phone, her fingers moving fast. "Smile, little gnome," she whispered, raising the phone for a picture. Panic fluttered in Longery's chest. If she snapped a photo, if she truly saw him, the veil would tremble, magic would leak, trouble would come tumbling after. He had to get out. Now. In his haste, his foot caught on the fishing gnome's rod. The whole row teetered, nearly toppling. Longery darted out from behind the gnomes, zigzagging through the marigolds. Zoe gasped, her phone raised, snapping photos as fast as her thumbs could tap. For one split second, their eyes met, hers wide with astonishment, his sparkling with mischief and fear. Then, with a flicker of magic, Longery vanished, leaving only a swirl of clover-scented air behind. Zoe stared at the empty space where he'd been, her heart pounding. Had she really seen him, or was it just a trick of the light, a shadow among the gnomes? She glanced at her phone, scrolling through the blurry photos. In one, she caught a flash of green and a glimpse of a tiny, startled face. Proof, sort of. As she knelt to examine the spot where Longery had disappeared, her hand brushed against something cold and heavy in the grass. She picked it up, a small leather pouch, soft and worn, tied with a golden string. It jingled when she shook it, and a single gold coin slipped out, glinting in the sunlight. Zoe's eyes widened. "No way," she breathed. "A leprechaun's coin?" She looked around, half expecting the little creature to pop back out and snatch it from her hand. But the garden was still, the only movement the gentle nodding of the daisies. Meanwhile, hidden just beyond the veil, Longery pressed his back to a tree, breathing hard. His hands patted his pockets, jacket, vest, and trousers, until dread pooled in his stomach. His coin pouch was gone. "Oh, Clover and Calamity," he groaned, peeking around the trunk. He could just make out Zoe, turning the pouch over in her hands, her face alight with wonder. Uncle Datson's warnings echoed louder than ever. If a human kept a leprechaun's coin, who knew what sort of magic might slip through the cracks? The veil was already thin. Now it might just tear. Longery's heart pounded, torn between fear and excitement. He'd have to get that pouch back, without being seen again. But as he watched Zoe tuck the pouch into her backpack, he couldn't help but smile. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of the greatest adventure yet. In the garden, the gnomes stood silent and watchful, as if they too were waiting to see what would happen next. Longery paced a nervous figure 8 in the shadowy heart of the hollow tree, his boots scuffing the mossy floor. The air inside the council chamber was thick with the scent of damp earth and old magic, heavy, ancient, and a little bit sour, like the bottom of a forgotten teacup. Lanterns hung from the roots above, casting golden pools of light that danced with every anxious shuffle. Uncle Datson stood ramrod, straight beside the entrance, arms crossed tight over his chest, jaw clenched so hard it looked like he might crack a tooth. His wild beard bristled with indignation, and his eyes, usually clear, now flashed with anger. Longery tried not to meet his uncle's gaze. He'd never seen Datson this angry, not even the time Longery had accidentally turned the family's breakfast porridge into a bubbling swamp. At the far end of the hollow, 3 elders perched on their toadstool thrones, robes shimmering with threads of moonlight and dew. Elder Brannock, whose eyebrows were so long they curled like fiddleheads, tapped his gnarled staff on the wood. The sound echoed, sharp and final. "Longery Omas," Brannock intoned, voice as deep as a well and twice as cold. "Do you understand the gravity of what you've done?" Longery swallowed, his mouth dry as dust. I do, Elder Brannock. It was an accident. I didn't mean." "Didn't mean," Elder Fyra interrupted, her silver hair crackling with static. "The veil is not a toy, boy. It is the boundary between our world and theirs. When it thins, so does our safety. So does our magic." Datson's boots squeaked as he shifted his weight. "With respect, elders, the boy's heart was in the right place. He's young, curious, and reckless," Elder Brannock rumbled. "You know the rules, Datson. The coin pouch is more than a trinket. It anchors our luck, binds our secrets. If a human keeps it, if they believe." Elder Fyra leaned forward, her eyes sharp as frost. "The veil may tear. The worlds could bleed together. We have seen the signs. Wildflowers blooming out of season, shadows flickering where none should be, magic leaking where it ought not." Longery shrank under their gaze, wishing he could sink straight into the roots. He twisted his cap in his hands, knuckles white. "I'm sorry. I only wanted to see the human world. I thought I could slip back before anyone noticed. But she saw me, and now she has the pouch." Elder Murtaugh, who hadn't spoken yet, cleared his throat. A sound like gravel rolling down a hill. Intentions matter little when consequences are so grave. The veil is thinner now than it's been in 100 years. If it fails, there will be no hiding. Not for any of us. A heavy silence settled, broken only by the drip-drip of water somewhere deep in the roots. Datson's voice, when it came, was low but steady. Longery's made a mistake, but he's my kin. I'll stand by him. We'll set this right. Elder Brannock's eyes softened, just a fraction. You must, both of you. The pouch must be retrieved, and the human's memory clouded. The veil must be mended, or we risk everything. Longery nodded, shame prickling hot behind his eyes. He felt the weight of every rule he'd broken, every warning he'd ignored. He wanted nothing more than to run and hide, but he squared his shoulders. I'll do whatever it takes, I promise. Elder Fyra's gaze lingered on him, searching for something. Courage, perhaps, or just a spark of sense. You're your mother's child, Longery, brave but heedless. Let's hope you've inherited her wisdom, too. The elders rose from their thrones, robes whispering like wind through grass. Go, Brannock said. Before the sun sets, every moment matters. Datsun put a hand on Longery's shoulder, squeezing tight. Come on, lad. We've got work to do. As they left the hollow, the weight of the elder's words pressed on Longery's chest. The forest outside seemed changed, quieter, darker, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Longery glanced up at his uncle, voice small. Are you angry with me, uncle? Datsun's face was stern, but his eyes were gentle. Angry? Sure. Worried? Even more. But you're not alone, Longery. We'll fix this. Together. Longery nodded, hope flickering in his chest like a lantern in the mist. The path ahead was shadowed and uncertain, but with Datsun beside him, he felt just brave enough to face whatever waited beyond the veil. Somewhere, in the human world, a girl with a purple backpack turned a gold coin over in her hand, and the magic between worlds shimmered. Thin, trembling, and full of possibility. Zoe sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, the glow of her phone screen painting her face in soft blues and whites. She stared at the blurry photo again. The one she'd snapped just before the strange little figure had vanished like a puff of clover-scented smoke. There it was, a flash of green, a curl of fiery red hair, and eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief. It wasn't perfect, not by any stretch, but Zoe knew what she'd seen. She had seen. Her fingers trembled slightly as she zoomed in, trying to catch every detail. The photo was grainy, the edges fuzzy, but the magic in that tiny face was unmistakable. She whispered to herself, "It's real. It's really real." Her older brother, Max, barged into the room, a teasing grin spreading across his face. Still chasing fairy tales, Zoe? Maybe you should try chasing a personality instead. He tossed a crumpled sock at her, which bounced harmlessly off her shoulder. Zoe rolled her eyes but refused to let his teasing dim her excitement. It's not a fairy tale, Max. I saw a leprechaun. I have proof. She held up her phone like a trophy. Max snorted. Proof? That looks like a green blur and a bad haircut. You're gonna get laughed out of school if you post that online. But Zoe's eyes shone with determination. Maybe, but some people believe in things they can't see right away, like magic. She tapped the screen, fingers flying as she typed out her blog post. The day I saw a leprechaun, my true story. She wrote about the garden, the gnomes, the sudden flutter of wings, and the tiny figure that vanished just as she raised her phone. She described the coin pouch she'd found, the strange tingling she felt when she held it, and the whisper of something ancient and wild in the air. She hit publish and leaned back. Her heart pounded. The post went live, and within minutes, comments began to trickle in. Some were kind. Wow, Zoe, that's amazing. I've always believed in magic. Others were skeptical. Nice Photoshop job, kid. A few were downright cruel. Stop embarrassing yourself. Leprechauns don't exist. Zoe read every comment, her cheeks flushing with a mix of pride and frustration. But with each skeptical word, her conviction only grew stronger. That night, as the moon cast silver shadows across her room, Zoe lay awake, the coin pouch resting on her bedside table. She reached out and touched it, feeling a faint warmth, like a heartbeat beneath the leather. The world outside her window seemed quieter, as if it too was holding its breath. Her mind buzzed with questions. Who was that little leprechaun? Why had he come to her garden? And what did it mean that she now held a piece of his world? The next morning, Zoe's blog post had gathered more attention. Messages from strangers poured in, some sharing stories of their own magical encounters, others warning her to be careful. But Zoe was undeterred. She replied to each message, her words weaving a tapestry of hope and wonder. At breakfast, Max shook his head, still skeptical but a little less dismissive. Okay, maybe there's something weird going on, but don't get your hopes up. People love a good story. Zoe smiled, a secret spark lighting her eyes. Maybe, but sometimes, stories are the first step to finding the truth. As she walked to school, the coin pouch tucked safely in her backpack, Zoe felt a new kind of courage growing inside her. The world was bigger and stranger than she'd ever imagined, and she was ready to explore it, one magical step at a time. The house was quiet, wrapped in the velvet hush of midnight. Moonlight spilled through the window, painting silver puddles on the carpet. In the hallway, a grandfather clock ticked, steady, relentless, counting down the seconds of borrowed magic. Longery crept along the baseboard, his boots muffled by a spell of silence. Uncle Datsun followed, grumbling under his breath, his beard bristling with every anxious glance. They moved like shadows, slipping beneath tables and ducking behind chair legs, their eyes fixed on the prize, the coin pouch, resting on Zoe's bedside table. "Quick, now," Datsun whispered, his voice barely more than a breeze. "In and out, no dawdling, no chatter." Longery nodded, nerves tingling. He could see Zoe, curled beneath a tangle of blankets, her hair splayed across the pillow like a halo. The pouch glimmered beside her, almost close enough to touch. He reached for it, just as Zoe's eyes fluttered open. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Zoe sat up, blinking sleep from her eyes. She didn't scream. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she peered at Longery with a calm, curious gaze. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered, her voice soft as the night air. Longery froze, hand hovering over the pouch. Datsun tensed, ready to vanish at the first sign of trouble. But Zoe only smiled, a small secret smile that made Longery's heart skip. "You're not afraid?" he asked, his voice barely more than a squeak. Zoe shook her head. "Why would I be? I've always believed, even when no one else did." She glanced at the pouch, then back at Longery. "You want this, don't you?" Longery nodded, feeling suddenly very small beneath her steady gaze. "It's important. If you keep it, the magic between our worlds gets tangled. The veil could tear." Datsun stepped forward, his tone gentle but firm. "We'll need to take the pouch, girlie. We'll have to cloud your memory. It's the only way to keep everyone safe." Zoe's eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. "Please don't. Promise. I won't tell anyone. I just wanted to know magic was real, that I wasn't just imagining things." Longery hesitated, torn between duty and the honesty shining in Zoe's eyes. He glanced at Datsun, who frowned, uncertainty flickering across his face. Zoe reached out, holding the pouch in her open palm. "You can take it. I won't stop you. But if you erase my memory, it'll be like none of this ever happened. And I'll go back to wishing and wondering, instead of knowing." The room was silent except for the ticking clock and the quiet, hopeful thump of Zoe's heart. Longery took a deep breath. He stepped forward, gently closing Zoe's fingers around the pouch. "Keep it, just for a moment," he said, "because you believed, even when no one else did." Datson's eyes widened, but he said nothing. Longery reached into his coat and drew out a single gold coin, smaller than the rest, etched with a clover and a crescent moon. He pressed it into Zoe's hand. "This is for you. A gift. It's not like the others. It won't tangle the veil, but it will remind you that magic is real. And so are your dreams." Zoe's fingers curled around the coin, her eyes shining with wonder. "Thank you," she whispered. Longery smiled, a little shy, a little proud. "Thank you for believing." Datsun shook his head, but a smile tugged at his lips. "Come on, son. Time to go." Longery took the pouch. He then gave Zoe a final wink and slipped into the shadows. Datsun followed, boots silent as falling leaves. As the first hint of dawn crept through the window, Zoe lay back, the magical coin warm in her hand. She closed her eyes, heart full of secrets and starlight, knowing that somewhere out there, magic was watching over her, and that she would never stop believing. The hollow tree was colder than Longery remembered, the air thick with the weight of ancient magic and judgment. Lanterns flickered along the gnarled roots, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to whisper warnings. Longery stood in the center of the council chamber, his cap clutched tight in trembling hands, boots scuffed from restless pacing. The elders sat upon their toadstool thrones, faces grave and unreadable. Elder Brannock's staff tapped against the wood, each strike a slow, deliberate drumbeat. Elder Fyra's silver hair crackled with tension, and Elder Murta's eyes were narrowed, sharp as hawk's talons. Uncle Datsun stood beside Longery, arms folded, jaw set. His wild beard bristled with worry, but his eyes were steady, clear and loyal. "Longery Omas," Elder Brannock intoned, voice echoing through the chamber. "You stand before us accused of endangering the veil, exposing our world, and risking the balance of magic. What say you?" Longery swallowed hard. The words he'd rehearsed tumbled from his lips, honest and trembling. I made mistakes. I was reckless. I let my curiosity get the better of me. I thought I could slip into the human world and back without harm, but I was wrong. I lost the coin pouch. I let a human see me. I broke the rules. I'm sorry." He looked up, meeting the elders' stony gazes. "If I must be exiled, I understand. I'll go." A hush fell over the chamber, heavy as a thundercloud. The drip-drip of water in the roots seemed louder than ever. Datsun stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. "If I may speak, elders." He didn't wait for permission. "My nephew may be reckless. Yes, but he's also brave. He faced his mistake head-on. He trusted a human. But in doing so, he showed courage and kindness. He could have erased her memory, but he chose trust instead of fear." Elder Fyra's eyes narrowed. "And if that trust is misplaced? If the human betrays us?" Datsun shook his head. "She won't." I saw the look in her eyes. The same look as Longery's. Wonder. Hope. She'll keep our secret. Sometimes. It takes more strength to trust than to hide. A long silence followed. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions softening just a fraction. Elder Murta cleared his throat, his voice gentler than before. "Longery Omas, your actions were dangerous, but your heart was true. You have shown both folly and wisdom. The council will not exile you, but you will remain under close watch. Let this be a lesson to you and to all who would cross the veil without thought." Longery's knees nearly buckled with relief. He managed a shaky nod. "Thank you, elders. I promise I'll be careful. I'll do better." Elder Brannock's lips twitched, almost a smile. "See that you do, boy. Spring is coming. Let us hope it brings renewal for us all." Datsun clapped Longery on the shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. "Come on, nephew, let's go home." As they left the council chamber, the lanterns seemed to burn a little brighter, and Longery's heart felt lighter than it had in days. Spring tiptoed into the world on green velvet feet. The air was sweet with the scent of new grass and wild violets. The sun painted everything in gold and honey. In the corner of her backyard, Zoe knelt in the soft earth, dirt smudged on her cheeks and a smile blooming on her lips. She'd spent weeks planning and planting, coaxing tiny shoots and stubborn seeds into a shape that made her heart sing. A sprawling patch of clover, each leaf carefully tended, forming a perfect four-leaf pattern. At the very center, nestled among the emerald leaves, sat the golden coin, catching the morning light and scattering it in 1,000 directions. Zoe pressed her palms to the soil, feeling the hum of life beneath her fingers. She whispered a thank you to the earth, to the magic, to the memory of a night when the world had grown bigger and stranger than she'd ever dreamed. Birdsong danced through the air, and a gentle breeze tugged at her ponytail. Zoe closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun and the promise of spring fill her up. When she opened them, something caught her eye, a glint of gold hidden among the clover leaves. She leaned closer, heart fluttering. There, tucked between two lush green stems, was a tiny pair of shoes, no bigger than thimbles, each one buckled with gold and dusted with dew. Zoe gasped, her smile growing impossibly wide. She cradled the shoes in her palm, marveling at their perfect, impossible detail. She knew without a doubt who they belonged to. From the shadow of the old oak at the edge of the yard, Longery watched. He stood just beyond the veil, invisible to all but the most believing eyes. His emerald coat gleamed in the sunlight, and a gentle, quiet smile played on his lips. He watched as Zoe tucked the tiny shoes back into the clover, her fingers gentle, reverent. She looked up, scanning the garden, and for a heartbeat, their eyes met. Hers full of wonder, his full of gratitude. Longery tipped his cap, a silent thank you, and melted back into the dappled shade. The veil shimmered, whole and strong, holding the worlds apart but not forever separate. Zoe sat back on her heels, the golden coin warm in her pocket, the memory of magic alive in her heart. She knew she would always look for the impossible, always believe in the unseen. And somewhere, in the wild green places where magic still lingered, Longery the Leprechaun grinned and set off on a new adventure, the world wide open before him, the promise of spring in every step. We hope you have enjoyed this short story. Please subscribe for more adventures yet to come. All rights reserved. Story Stream Audio.